Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to go to New York and speak with Gerald Celente of trendsresearch.com. Gerald Celente, welcome back to the Keiser Report.
Oh, it's great being on with you, Max.
All right, Gerald Celente, I see that they've sold out of all their guns at Walmart. What's that all about?
Well, it's the knee-jerk reaction to the slaughter in Connecticut. And, you know, they don't want to look at the root cause of this, and they're blaming it on guns. And President Obama is talking about, you know, ending this cycle of violence. To which I say, if you're going to end the cycle of violence, why not start from the top down? This is a culture of cruelty. You know, when a drone blows up a family and there's collateral damage, or when 1 million people are killed in Iraq because of a war that was started for fake reasons, well, there's no blowback on that. When predator drones are killing innocent people in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Yemen, hey, that's okay. So, you know, they say that the fish rots from the head down, and that's what's going on in America. It's rotting from the head down, and this is just another part of the culture of violence that sweeps this nation, a culture of cruelty. So what they're trying to do is blame it on guns. And now they're even talking about putting the National Guard in schools and more surveillance and more wiretapping. We can't let this happen. And of course, they're not talking about at all about what kind of drugs this kid might have been on, like so many of the other mass murderers of these young people that have been on Ritalin, on Prozac, on Zoloft, on all of these drugs. They're not bringing that up at all. They're blaming it on guns.
Well, I got an idea, you know, Gerald, you mentioned the culture of cruelty in the United States. Of course, they're at the same time pro-life. So I thought maybe a trend for 2013 would be to arm fetuses. In case someone tried to abort them, they could shoot their way out of the womb. You think that'll catch on?
Well, they already have it. They call them ballistic missiles, you know?
All right, let's talk about your latest Trends Journal. You talk about Generation F. With this generation that will have to fight the next American Revolution, as you're calling it. So talk a little bit about that, Gerald. Well,
they call them the millennials. And, you know, this is the young generation just coming through the workforce. And they're Generation F. You know, this is the first time in modern American history where current generations feel they're going to be poorer and have less opportunities than the ones that were previously before them, you know, the generations before them. And this is really an historic event in the United States where people have lowered the bars of expectations. And it's also very interesting because these were the children that were brought up where their parents had names for them. They were special when they were little kids. And then they started to grow up a little more, and they became amazing, you know, having never done anything. But, of course, they were special and amazing. They could never lose at anything. Even the losers won trophies. So now what's happening, they're into the real world now, and it doesn't look so good. Because when you look at kids that graduate college, Max, 50% of them that have jobs that barely require a college education. They're moving back home. They have a futureless future. So now we're looking at it and we're saying, where is it going to go? We're looking at really the second American Revolution. It's already begun. The groundwork has been laid. When you look at what just happened with the presidential election, and I've been following this stuff for 33 years. I used to be the assistant to the Secretary of the New York State Senate. I have pictures with me and Reagan, me and John Connally, other people. I was in Washington for several years. I know what it looks like. And I've never seen an election that ended with a thud like the 2012 presidential election. And so what we're looking at is a repudiation of both systems. So we believe that we're going to see some really big changes happening in 2013 and beyond.
All right, Gerald, you talked about Generation F. You're saying that the incomes are crashing, unemployment in the youth is rising quite substantially. At the same time, the country is incurring exponential growth in the obligations that it owes its creditors. The debt ceiling's been raised, the quantitative easing has been raised. So isn't this going to end? How is this going to end? Because if the next generation isn't making enough money to substantiate the growth needed to pay off the bonds, and the bond growth keeps rising exponentially, that seems like at some point there's going to be a huge disconnect. Your thoughts?
Well, there is going to be a disconnect. It's the same disconnect that's going on in Greece, the same one that's going on in Spain and in Ireland and Portugal and in Italy. So, yeah, the disconnect is going to be there. There's not going to be any money for them. There aren't going to be any jobs. And these are the things that revolutions are made of. And we're going to see more of it. You know, it's bonds away in 2013. And Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, one of our contributing editors to the Trends Journal, is going to be writing an extensive piece on that. He says the bond bubble is ready to burst. So these kids are going into this society, and there's nothing in front of them that gives them any optimism. I mean, they don't even believe in hope and change anymore. So what we're going to see when you look around Europe, for example, Max, you have unemployment rates among the youth that's over 50% in Spain and Greece. It's approaching that in Italy and Portugal. And then you're going to have the same thing in the United States. You have these young people with their hormones raging, and they're raging mad. It's the same thing that brought down the governments in Tunisia and in Egypt. Of course, they've been co-opted. The revolution's been stolen. But the people that brought it about were the young people. And this Generation F, we believe, is going to be the spark behind the Second American Revolution.
All right, Gerald, you talk about the Second American Revolution. It's in the latest Trends Journal. And you mention in the journal, when you talk about the Second American Revolution, that it is a revolution of the heart. When I read that, I'm thinking, well, you don't want to veer too close in the direction of calling for an all-out violent insurrection. And yet, Gerald, you're talking about a country with all these huge social issues that has amongst its population over 250 million guns. So if there is a Second American Revolution, even if it is a revolution of the heart, it's happening within in the context of a very well-armed population. How is that going to be not anything but a bit chaotic, Gerald?
Because when you go back to the first American Revolution, the foundation under it was an awakening. And the awakening, of course, back then was tied to religion, but part of the awakening, and the essential part of it, was people understanding it's their responsibility. They're responsible for their own salvation. And it's not about looking to leaders or deities to lead them, but to lead themselves. And we believe that we have two choices. It could either be guns and armies or mind and heart. And when you look, Max, at a Renaissance, and I started thinking about it, you know, the Renaissance began after the Dark Ages, after the Black Plague, rather. So you had, what, 60% of Europe was decimated. And the people realized, hey, we're doing something wrong. The people that survived, that went to the monasteries, the convents, went out into the areas away from the destruction, realized that there's a different way of living, and went back, a renaissance, a rediscovery, to bring back from the past. So as we're looking at it now, I started thinking, a renaissance has already begun. It's begun in food. And it's really one of the essential elements, food, clothing, and shelter. Think of the Renaissance in food. You're a former, expat. You're an expat. You remember when they used to serve Sanka, and they used to call it coffee. You remember when you couldn't get a good loaf of bread. You wondered what Wonder Bread was. There's a renaissance in buying local, growing local, in higher qualities of food. If we keep expanding that renaissance of thought, if we can fill our bodies with finer food, we can start filling our minds with different messages than the messages of cruelty.
Well, Gerald, you know, you mentioned the Black Plague, you know, going back to European history, and of course the medieval period before the Enlightenment, before the Renaissance. You had a system of serfs and lords. There was very little in terms of justice. Now, today, in London, you have a bank, HSBC, one of the biggest banks in the world. They were caught laundering money and financing al-Qaeda and other terrorists, but the government is saying that we can't prosecute them because it might disrupt the global banking system. So we've gone from too big to fail to too big to prosecute. We have a two-tier justice system where the folks at the top can break a law without any fear of any prosecution whatsoever. So I understand what you're saying, that people are going to go back to the hippie communes, they're going to grow their own food, and it's going to be a big summer of love. But if you've got banks who are out there committing crimes with no penalties whatsoever, and they're bankrupting the global economy, how do you get to the hippie paradise from there, Gerald?
Yeah, I'm not talking about the hippie paradise. I'm talking about, when I'm talking about food and culture, that you go to great restaurants now and have food that you never had before, and it's all over the country. But it's more than that. It's an understanding of quality. I mean, you're 100% right about, you know, this is the Christmas season. Forgive me if I mention Jesus Christ during the Christmas season and not retail sales. But let's remember that the one time that the Prince of Peace becomes violent is to drive the money changers out of the temple. The reality is there. You're talking about HSBC. How about the LIBOR scandal? How about UBS? How about Barclay? How about MF Global? Yeah, the word justice is J-U-S-T-U-S, just us. And that's what I'm saying, Max. It's never been more transparent than now. The vacuum is so large. The BSer-in-chief, Obama, could no longer get away with the baloney. I'm really happy that he won, for one reason and one reason only, is because if Romney won, people would have said, oh, give him a chance. Give him a chance as things are going down. Now, not many people now have any high expectations from Obama. People have no high expectations from government. When the vacuum is this big, you can fill it with something different. You can fill it with different music. You can fill it with different entertainment. You can fill it with different messages. So there are a lot of positive things happening as the whole system is unraveling as well. Again, a renaissance was born from death. And we have a death of culture, a death of style, a death of integrity, a death of passion, a death of respect, and a death of courage. So when this death happens, something new is born to replace it.
All right, Gerald, I get your point about it's a return to quality and not a hippie revolution, but I think you should consider a Nehru jacket and love beads for attire in 2013. But we're out of time, Gerald. Thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Hey, thank you, Max, and Happy New Year.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacey Herbert. I want to thank my guest, Gerald Celente of Trends Research. If you'd like to send me an email, please do so at keiserreport@rttv.ru. Until next time, Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.